What is up, everybody? Brian Mendler back in your life on this Monday, January 20th, 2020. And I have a huge smile on my face this morning because I am joined by the one and only amazing principal of McMinnville. Did I say that correctly?
You did.
McMinnville High School outside of Portland, Oregon, correct?
Correct.
The great
You're
Amy
nailing it.
Fatt with me. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
It's so good to see you. So, Portland, are you right outside of Portland? Where are you exactly?
Well, we're about an hour from Portland, an hour from the coast, and an hour from the mountains. So we're nestled right there in the valley.
So, I'm planning to hopefully catch up with you when I come out there to work in Beaverton in
You
April. So, to
should.
kind of
You
have that,
absolutely
we're on
should.
the calendar. Put me down. So, first year principal this year, correct? How's it going for
Correct.
you? I
It
remember back when you first got this job on social media and you were posting and you were nervous about it and you were kind of excited but nervous. So, how's it
right.
going so far? You
Well,
enjoying
it's
it?
it's going great, but then again, I don't know what I don't know. So, ignorance is bliss a little bit your first year. It's kind of like your first year teaching. I mean, I feel like anyone who says they're ready to be principal of a 6A high school isn't ready to be principal of a 6A high school. So, I'm learning every day. It's a bit like drinking out of a fire hose, but like any job, from classified to teaching to administration. If you like, I love the phrase going in humble and hungry, then you're, most likely going to have a successful year. So I'm having fun, and I'm really lucky to work with the kids and the staff that I work with. So it's kind of a dream job in that sense.
Are you the kind of person that enjoys the not knowing thing? Like I am.
Yes.
I'm a person who, if I wake up every day and I like a routine. Don't get me wrong. I'm a routine person, but I also like deviations and I like not knowing. I like when things pop up that I have to deal with. And some people enjoy that and some people don't. And I feel like that's something with that kind of a job. You have to be that kind of person where you enjoy those type things, correct?
For sure. I'm a super restless person, and my personal hell is boredom. So this job suits me really well, for sure.
What do you think so far is the hardest part of the job? I've always wondered about that.
That's a good question. Right now, for me, the hardest part of my particular job is that the sheer size of the school with 200 staff. So I'm a former elementary teacher,
Yeah.
and as a fifth grade teacher, the fulfillment I got from the job was forming personal connections with all of my students, and really being able to watch their growth close up and in person. And with 2,200 students and 200 staff, the hardest part is feeling like I know everyone well and that they are getting what they need from me. And I have to remind myself sometimes that that need is somewhat ego driven, because I don't always need to be the one to move the ship in that way, or to move people in that way. We've got incredible administrative team, and relying on the community to be there for each other is something that I am learning and growing in. But I think the hardest part for me is just there is, it's a little bit like, like whack-a-mole at the,
Yeah, of
yeah.
course.
So I feel like my job is reverse whack-a-mole. You're like pulling people up all the time and trying to lift them up,
Uh,
but as you're lifting one person up, the next person's kind of dipping, and not in a performance way, but just in the emotional labor of the job and trying to be there for everyone. And that's the part that keeps me up at night and weighs on me if I don't feel like I've adequately been there for someone that's pouring their heart and their soul into these kids. And I haven't seen them in 3 weeks because they're on the other side of the building, and there's one crisis after the next coming up in my job. And that's juggling all of that so far has been the hardest part of my job.
yeah, for sure. And us teachers can be difficult. I mean, we want attention and we want you to notice us and we're working hard and I think it's got to be really tough to kind of try to juggle both at the same time. Is that your community where you are? Do you live in that
I
community
do.
as well and your
Yep,
kids go
I
to school
do.
there and everything?
Correct. Yeah. Yep. So and I don't know that I'm the type of person that could take a job outside the community I live in, because I find one of the most fulfilling parts is really shaping the community from within. And the school to me is the best platform by which to shape your own community. And so, not that I don't care about neighboring communities, but I find it just really rewarding to be a piece of the fabric of the community and a part that can really shape the narrative of who we are and who we're becoming. And so to me, that's always been the most exciting role that schools play in our country. And that's why I'm so passionate about this gig. I'm what you would call a social reconstructionist, which means I believe the purpose of school is really to shape the communities that we live in. And so for me, it would be really hard to say work in Portland and commute and live in McMinnville.
Yeah, you know, one of the things that I love about my job and traveling so often is I get to go to so many small towns and see so many different things. And oftentimes when you go to small towns, the school really is the hub of the
It's the hub.
community.
Yep.
And
And
I
we're a
love how
one high school town. Yep.
yeah, I've found it's the school and the fire station. Usually those two, really, it's the truth. Usually
Hmm.
those two things, every town has those two
Right.
things in
For
common.
sure.
And they're both places of helping of other
Hmm.
people and of being there, you know, being there for others and making the community a better place. And I find those two places often the events and the cookouts and they happen
Yep.
at one of those two. And I love the thought process of using the school to build the community and
Right.
shape the community. How specifically do you do that? Like what do you guys do where you're at? If I'm sitting there and I'm like, that's a cool idea, where do I even start?
Sure. Well, I would say it starts with not being on autopilot with the way we've always done school. So events like open house, let's say, when I first got to the high school, our open house was pretty typical, like most open houses. There would be, a handful of parents that showed up. Typically, they're the parents who need it the least, um, and they would go around to the 8 different periods that our students have on the bell system and listen to the teacher deliver their syllabus. And we had to step back and ask, what is the purpose of this? And could we get a bigger bang for our buck doing something different? And how do we, like you said, make our school more of a community hub? So we're the Grizzlies, and we turned our open house into an open home by doing what we call Grizz Fest, which is this giant fair that we put on as a school. And parents and students and younger kids and even community members who don't have students at our high school come, and we cook for them, we barbecue, and we have live performances from our students, and we really showcase the talents of our students and the opportunities that our school provides to students at that event. And then teachers wear t-shirts that say staff with their name tag on it, and they basically just roam and mingle. And we found that we get, I think, we had a couple thousand people at our last Grizz
Wow.
Fest, which is exponentially more involvement than we had at our open house. So on one hand, it's just everything that we do in school. It's stepping back and saying, why do we do this? Can we do it differently in order to serve more people and serve them better? And then I would say the other piece in really shaping our community is communication. I'm a firm believer that the one of the principal's most important roles is telling the story of the children in our community. And so that's why I'm so active on social media. That's why communication is probably one of my most important priorities as principal, is because I believe that the community needs to hear stories of hope and needs to know that kids these days are actually pretty amazing. And what is I find to be true is that um, who we are definitely dictates the stories that we tell, but it's also true that the stories that we tell kind of become who we are. And so I think telling a positive story about our community and our students is a great way to shape the communities we live in too.
It's so interesting to hear you say that because literally every guest that I've had on, whether it's, you know, Joe Sanfilippo, like
Hmm.
he lives and breathes Go
Right.
Crickets. And, you know, one
Hmm.
of the things that he said on here is he said, you know, if you don't communicate and you don't define who you are, then someone's going to
Someone
create the
else
narrative
will. Yep.
for you. Right. And like that's a really dangerous thing. Like, and then they're creating the narrative based on what happened to them back when they were like 7 years old. And
Exactly.
yeah, and he was just saying how that's because the critics, the downside people will say, you're trying to get fame and you're trying to get
Sure.
notoriety and you're trying to show off and you think you're so good. I mean, I've heard that multiple times as well. When
Right.
me, it's got nothing to do with that other than I just enjoy disseminating information. I like the process of learning and getting better and actually like social media for me is the most perfect platform because for my whole life I've liked learning in short bursts. I've
Me too.
always been overwhelmed. I've always been overwhelmed. When I was a kid, I struggled with reading and the biggest part of my struggle I felt like was I would get overwhelmed quick. Like, so the first thing that would happen when a teacher would give me an assignment that was reading related was I would look to see how long it was. That was
Right.
always my first move. It was instinctive. How long is this? And that move right there decided in my mind whether I was going to be capable of doing it or not. And I was perfectly capable of doing it, but I would often tell myself that I wasn't. And
Right.
that's why when I started writing books, I made a vow that I would never have a book that contained a chapter with more than 10 pages because I was like, I'm writing books for me where you can get short, but that way I want the person who goes into that book study saying, I hate book studies. I've had this happen where like somebody's messaged me and been like, we're doing a book study on your book, That One Kid. And I hate this. I was so annoyed. And then I opened chapter 5 because we were doing that tonight and it's a page and a half. And I'm like, literally, chapter 5 in my book is a page and a half because sometimes things don't need to be that long. Like things can be
Totally.
done in short bursts. And I love how you do that. What got you started on social media? And I mean, you're obviously a queen on there. And I mean that in the best way. Like you just continue to put out amazing content. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, and I'm with you. I have attention issues myself, and so Twitter is a perfect platform for me because it's short and concise and to the point, and I can move on to the next thing. And so, to be honest, the reason I started social media was not actually for a very noble purpose. So when I wrote my dissertation chair said, "Okay, your last assignment, Amy, is to pitch this to some publishing companies because." If you ever choose to write a book in the future, you need to know how to do it. And so I pitched it to one thinking I'm going to get this assignment complete. And I got offered a book contract. And part of that contract was to kind of promote the book on social media. But I hate self promotion. I hate all forms of it. You'll never see me try to sell anything on social media. You'll never see me talk about my book on there because it just seems I just can't wrap my arms around it without feeling smarmy. So um,
Mm,
I thought to myself, like, if I just post about some of the ideas in my book instead of posting about the book itself, and people think that the ideas have merit, then that will be as exciting for me as people reading the book. And that will probably count for the publisher as far as promoting it. And so I actually started on Twitter because I didn't want to be on platforms where my friends and family were and overly talk about education or talk about my ideas because I didn't want to bombard them with my geekiness. So I joined Twitter, a totally new platform, and just decided to start posting some of my ideas on there. And it was it was surprising to me how many people felt like my ideas resonated with their own. And so that was fun for me too because sometimes in my own school community, I can be considered a bit of a rebel rouser. And so I've only worked in the McMinnville School District since I graduated college. So it was validating that there are others that share some of the same thoughts and ideas that I do. And I was able to connect with some solid researchers. And I'm an education policy kind of gal. And so it's fun for me to um, follow um, other thought leaders on Twitter, like Tony Wagner's a fun one for me to follow. His ideas really are congruent with what my research uncovered in my book, and so it's meeting people like you. It's been fun to it's kept my why intact, I think, because um, I'm constantly stating my philosophy over and over and over. And in this position as principal of a high school, it's real easy to let the pressures get to you and kind of forget what you stand for. And so I think for me, social media actually keeps me grounded, and rather
Mm.
than like chasing fame, it keeps me grounded in what I stand for, and it also holds me accountable uh, to what I stand for. So people, if I'm doing something in school that's not congruent to what I just said on social media, I'll get called out.
Mm.
I love working at the high school because high school staff are spicy, and that's my kind of
They
people.
are. They are.
Yeah, they're super spicy, and so I am led up every day. People lead me just like I'm tasked with leading them, and so they hear and see what I'm saying on there, and they'll let me know if what I'm doing is not in line with that.
Wow, that's it. So there's so much you said there, like that I want to respond to. So high school staff are spicy. I agree with that. When I
Mhm.
do presentations and they tell me it's a high school staff, I'm immediately more
Yeah, getting
alerted
ready.
than when it's elementary staff. Because
Mhm.
high school staff, but they're cool. Like they're cool. They'll give you a couple minutes, but you got to be good. Like they make you be good, and
For sure.
if you get them, if you hook them, then they'll stay with you. But I think it's true for a lot of PD in general that people are just skeptical because there's a lot of bad PD out there. Like
Absolutely.
there's
Yep.
in my world, like behavior world, I mean, there's people running around talking about using tickets and stickers
Right.
and I'm sitting here like, bro, like, okay, you want to use that a tiny shred of that, fine, but you're gonna make that your foundation, you're gonna
Right.
fail. Like
Right.
always, and you say this all the time, relationships are always the foundation that never changes. That's always the foundation.
Without a doubt.
And what for me, anytime you want to turn the attention away from that, you're taking that finite amount of time that every human has in the day and you're going to waste it on something else, you know?
Exactly. And
What,
educators, time is their biggest currency. I mean, you got to be careful with their time for sure. And there's no and elementary school teachers, high school teachers, they know there's no silver bullet to student behavior. So to come with this quick fix or this behavior system or this, I mean, they can smell the BS, when you walk in the door with that kind of content.
And the other thing is it's insulting to the people that are doing the work. Like the people that
Totally.
are actually doing the work and like busting their butts on it and going to games and being a part of events and calling kids during break and seeing how they're doing. Like there are actually people doing that. And to
Right.
pretend like that's not the answer is it's just to a person like me, it's just gets frustrating. You talked about a couple things. You talked about so you loathe self promotion. I thought that was interesting because that's a huge part of what I think social media is for a lot of people. Why does it
Hmm.
bother you so much? I'm just curious. I'm
I
not a
don't.
huge fan of it either, but like I don't like it when someone's like, "Hey, bring me to your school. I'm great." Like or here's my new book, but where do
Right.
you draw the line? Because I promote this show like crazy. I put you like clips of you guys out there. To me, my thought process though is that's content. Like I'm trying to give you
Sure.
something good someone is saying at the same time saying listen to my show or watch my show.
Yeah, it's probably my own issue, but I think what I've seen is when people write a book because they have something to say, it's very different than when people write a book because they want to be an author. And so
Mm.
when you're just saying things or selling things so that you can make more money or have more fame or grow in your career, that's when your own content, I think, gets watered down because your passion's not going to come through. So I feel like people are intuitive enough to weed out those who are saying what they're saying and promoting it because they really believe it has the capacity to leverage change in schools versus people who are on, their 12th book in 12 months. You know what I mean? Because they want to publish another one.
Of course.
So, but that could be my own personal bias. I don't know. I tend to gravitate toward people whose content it has some depth to
I'm
it.
with you. I'm with you. I'm with you. How can you be an expert in 50 things? Like that's the other thing. Like
Yeah,
it's hard all of a sudden, right? I don't get that. But I understand what you mean though, and I think it's an interesting take, and I agree with you. My rule is for
sorry.
so when I talk about social media promotion, my rule is if I'm not trying to make any money off of anything, right? So my
Right.
thing is like I want you to listen to my show, but I don't get paid for this. No, nobody's. I'm not getting right. I just want people to listen. I want to
Right.
do. I want to not waste my own time when I go on the statistics and see how many people were actually on this and how many can I
Right.
actually help. That's really the ultimate goal. And I think if that remains the goal, usually good things happen. So your own children, how many kids you have? You have three kids?
I have two kids, so
Okay.
I have two 11-year-olds. They're considered to be virtual twins. So our daughter is our biological child, and then our son we adopted through the foster care system when he was 6, and they're 4 months apart. So it's been quite the adventure. But yeah, so a fifth grader and a sixth grader.
So tell about the adoption. You can't just say that like that and then not get into that. I'm so
Yeah.
interested. So how did that come about? And
Well, so my getting pregnant was super hard for my husband and myself, and we wanted to have more kids. And being a teacher at the time, when you're a teacher, you basically want to take every kid home with you. And I thought that in order to walk my talk, um, it would be adopting an older child and adopting locally would um, be fulfilling for me and help and helping obviously our community and a child in our community. And the crazy thing is um, when you so we adopted him before without ever meeting him. So we weren't foster parents and then said to ourselves, wow, we're really attached to this foster child. Let's see if we can adopt him. We went to classes to be able to adopt through foster care. And then it's really kind of weird. There's a website that you go on that shows kids pictures and it has like their bios and you basically submit your home study on kids who you're interested in that they would seem like they'd be a good match with your family. And then caseworkers look at your home study and determine whether it's a good fit. And then they basically say, all right, this is your child. And so we found out that we were getting our son on I think like November 1st. And then we met him on the 15th, and he was living with us full time by December 1st. Uh,
amazing.
when he was 6. And so, I mean, it was pretty crazy, pretty crazy experience. And now of course, I can't imagine not having him in our lives. And what people think is super strange is that he looks just like us. If you see pictures on social media, it's hard to tell which of our children is adopted and which one is our biological child. So it's been a fun adventure for sure.
What was the first night like with him? Like how did it go? What what
Uh,
what was it? What was the interaction? How do you do it?
yeah, I mean, I think it helped having our daughter there, because, kids don't care about you know, these big life events. It's like, oh, I have a brother. Okay, let's play cars, or you know what I mean? Let's play with these trucks. So
Right.
it's, whatever.
Cool.
But it's
Mommy snapped
similar.
her fingers and got us a brother. It's the
Yeah,
best. Right.
exactly. It's similar to when you bring a baby home from the hospital and the baby's laying there sleeping. You're like, what the heck just happened? Like there's a child there. I mean, I went into his room at night and he's sleeping. I'm just staring at him going, we have a 6-year-old son. This is nuts. So I mean, I hate to say it's a similar experience because it's vastly different in so many ways, but even though I didn't get to hold him when he was a baby
Yeah.
or have those firsts with him, there are plenty of firsts when you adopt an older child too. There's the first time they call you mom. There's the first time they spend the night in your house. And so it's different but equally special, I would say.
Oh man, you're getting me emotional over here. So what? So yeah, that's amazing. So well, anytime you say the age 6 or 8, these are my kids, and man, what you said about going online, it's kind of weird looking at pictures. What a great PD for teachers. They should do that as a professional development
Right.
for teachers, where you just pull that website up and you scroll through it. and you
Yeah,
say to everybody in the audience, you want to complain about kids? Every one of these kids would gladly go live in your house today because they have absolutely nowhere to live in their
isn't
life.
that the truth? Yeah,
Right? You should
absolutely.
do that as a
Totally.
PD. Just put that out
Totally.
there and scroll down and have them watch, and you
Mhm.
should record them while they're doing it. And
Right.
I mean, how could you not be unbelievably moved by that? So, when was the first time that he called you mom? How did
You
that
know,
go?
it was, I want to say it was not even a month in. And I think that's pretty typical, actually. Kids crave having those connections. And so it actually, it actually feels, what the research says is it even feels more natural to them than it would a
Mm.
parent as a parent's getting used to it. And so I think we were like cooking dinner together or something, and he just said something like, "Can I try that, mom?" or something. And I'm like, "Oh my God." And he didn't say it with intention like I'm going to say mom for the first time. It was just a knee jerk kind of comment from him. And so yeah, it happened pretty quickly actually.
Did it happen for dad as well
Yes.
in the
Well,
same time?
after me, I want to point that out because my
Because I
daughter.
always feel with my kids, like they said dad, dad before they said mama, just so
So
everybody knows.
my daughter's a total daddy's girl, and she said dad, and then dog, and then duck, and then mom. And so, so I'm glad that I got the first mom from our son. This is my turn.
That's so awesome. So how does it go then? Like, do you get in for all the information about where he was and what his life was like, and or do you not get that? Do you want it? Like, how do you take me through that?
So you get I got a stack of paper about this big that was the court documents.
Wow.
And you get a chance before you meet him to kind of read through, and it's got all the medical records and everything included in that too. So you get to read through it. And the interesting thing is, um, we we've we went through a pretty lengthy court process and still are going through that, just because of the circumstances with his bio family that we're in. And the first time we were in court, his biological grandparents were there as well. And you could tell there was a lot of discomfort in the room because they would have preferred him be placed with them. And there were reasons why that didn't happen. And it could have been that that relationship stayed tense over the course of the last 5 years or so. But we actually we see them probably once a month at least. And when we get off the phone with them, we tell them we love them. They tell us they love us, and not just our son, but the rest of our family as well. And so
Mm.
we've worked really hard to form a partnership with them and be as typical of a family as we can, not just for the sake of our son, but just because, my philosophy on life is more instead of less is more. So, more people in our family, the better.
Amen.
And yeah,
And it's you think that it's probably good for everybody, right? I mean,
totally.
you probably learn a lot from them, and I'm sure they're learning a ton from you, and hopefully it gets to the point where they become incredibly grateful for what you've done for them and for their entire family, and I'm guessing they probably are.
Yeah,
It's at the time you'd think, I'm just thinking, in terms of being them, you're like, they don't know you, they don't know where
right. It's
this story's
scary.
going. It's totally scary. How could it not be scary? And
Right.
then when you see that not only are they great people, but they're willing to embrace us and be a part of our
Mhm.
life, like, then what could really be better?
Exactly.
Does he actually see them?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you guys see them? And I'm saying he, but you guys as a family. So I'm guessing your daughter has gotten to know them as
hmm
well, and
Yep.
that's awesome.
Yep. 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 They come to his baseball games. They come over to our house. We meet them for lunch. When they buy Christmas presents, they buy them for both our kids. So yeah, they're part of our family.
It's so funny. I thought through, so I wasn't exactly sure of I was really stalking your Instagram last night, and I was just trying to see, like, because I'm trying to get to know people as best I can without, like, I don't like to use notes and I don't go too in depth, but I want to know basics. And there's pictures of your son on there, and
hmm
I had no clue that he was adopted. You said he
Yeah.
looks like us. He's the lefty, right?
Yep. Well,
Baseball swing?
he's a switch hitter, I think.
Yeah,
I don't know baseball, but
go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say he swings with his left and throws with his right. So
I saw him, so he's got an excellent swing. I mean, I played baseball for most of my life, and he's a lefty. And then I saw him throw the axe, right? And he
right.
threw that righty. So I'm like,
Yep.
man, kid's a good athlete too. So
He's a great athlete. He's a great athlete. Yeah.
that's so great. I always used to joke when I was teaching high school that it was more important to be seen than it was to see. Like I would always try to go to people's games and like events and stuff, but my thought process was always, let me get in, let me see my student real quick, be like, hey, how you doing? How you doing? How you doing?
Right.
And then, hey, you're gonna kill it today. You're gonna kill, and then the minute like the ball was tossed, I'd say for like 2 minutes, and I'd bounce and I like try to get to the next one.
I
I
love
just thought
that.
because I saw your son doing like this and this and this. Do you have to go to a lot of events as principal?
Oh
Is that
yeah.
a big thing now? High school
Yeah.
principal is a tough job, man. You got
It's
to be there all the time, right? A lot.
Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous. And that's why I love that whole Gen Z's philosophy of instead of like having a work life balance, having a work life blend, like bringing my kids to games with me. And
Yeah.
I don't have a keep work at work and keep home at home kind of thing. I'm just always working and always being a mom. It's just the combo. And we talked about being restless people. I don't do balance well. I don't even strive for it. Like, I just want. I'm more of a rhythm kind of gal. Like you go hard, and you might go hard for the whole fall season, and then you take a few weeks where you're just, you know what I mean, a zombie, and then, staying at home and hanging out with your family. And so I find that when I don't even strive for that balance, but allow myself permission to give 110% to both aspects of my life, I'm a lot less hard on myself.
Gotcha. I was just curious to get your thoughts on this. I get a lot of questions on social media about suspension and alternatives to suspension.
Mhm.
And number one is, do you guys suspend kids, and what does it have to be for? And number two is, what do you try to do instead? How do you what kind of measures do you take to try to? And I'll give you just one right off the bat that we used to have, which I really loved at a school that I worked, and I did not create this. It was there when I got there, but they had a program called Destructive Constructive, and one of the thought processes was when a kid does something destructive, they could have, so basically the parent had a choice. They could be suspended, or they would go into destructive constructive program. And if they went into that program, they didn't go to class for that day, but they basically did something constructive around the school. Like they would put them with the custodian, and they would help paint part of the building or fix something that was broken. Or I remember one time one of the kids was serving lunches in the lunchroom. That was a whole thing.
Yeah.
Do you guys do anything like that where you try to do something other than just sending the kid home?
We do, but I would say that we're a long way from where I would like to be as a school in terms of discipline practices. We haven't systematized anything that's more progressive like that. We do certainly still suspend students. I work with So I oversee special education at the high school, and part of the work that I've done the last 5 years here is um, I've built what we call an emotional growth center, and it's a place that serves some of our trickier students who have lagging skills in behavior. And I often am the one who will work with those students when there is discipline needed, or when
Mm,
there's some sort of consequence that they need for their actions. And you know, the suspension might work um, for students. For a lot of our students, it doesn't work for most of our students who end up getting suspended, as you
right,
know. So,
right.
I do things like if if I'm dishing out a consequence to a student that I don't know very well, especially, the consequence is what I call a side-by-side suspension. So they get to hang out with me all day and help me
Oh,
with
it's
stuff.
terrible.
And I know, and inevitably, every time,
I would
uh,
pay for that. I would actually
yeah,
pay for that. Pay big money for that.
students would not.
Put me in
But
there
every
all day.
time we end up having forming a good connection and having great conversation and laughing with each other. And man, the power of just laughing with students, I think people underestimate that. Just having fun together, and not everything has to be so heavy all the time. And so usually after that, after we just have time together, like you said, relationships leverage more success than anything. So after we are able to spend the day together and get to know each other, there's nothing then that I can't subsequently ask of them that they're not willing to do or engage in respectfully with me. And so that's a biggie for us. I would say the thing that we unfortunately suspend students. We don't have a lot of fights or anything at McMinnville High School. We take a pretty hard stance on drug use here, so that's a place where we haven't gotten very creative. But I am excited that in lieu of just sending students home, that we actually get them in drug and alcohol counseling when students are caught with some kind of drug infraction. So we have a long way to go, but we have a lot of good ideas too, and I'm excited about where we're heading in terms of discipline.
Do you guys have that? So you see some drug use and do you try to, of course, I'm guessing without a doubt, get to the bottom of it, right? Where's it coming from? What's going on with the kid? What's happening in their life? Like,
Totally.
all that stuff.
Yep,
It's almost like you play
absolutely.
counselor too a lot of the time, probably, right?
You said what?
I said it's almost like you play counselor a lot of the
Oh yeah,
time as well.
absolutely. And we have a support center that's staffed with a crisis counselor, a behavior specialist, a support assistant, a school psych, mental health practitioner. And so we also tell students that if they're struggling with addiction or just struggling with making good choices or getting away from the peer group that they've been, that they can go to our support center and say, hey, I'm using and I would like to stop, or I need help with this. And there's not going to be any consequences as a result. So I would say that the proactive supports that we have in our school are really strong. It's the way that we react when there's an infraction that we could shore up a little more.
Yeah, one of the things that I teach teachers is that I think that there's a difference between a consequence and a punishment. And I think there's a clear difference. And I think often in schools those words get used interchangeably, right? And
Totally.
in my mind, a consequence is designed to make you better. Period. End of story. We're trying
Right.
to make you better, right? We're trying to help you. We're trying to improve something. We're trying to get something to stop, right? And so, like, for example, you're calling people names. What's it going to take to get you to stop calling people names? And like, for me, I don't really care what the consequence is usually. My thought process is the consequence is really a vehicle to a destination. The destination's not
Absolutely.
negotiable, right? We're not going to negotiate that you're going to not call people names. That's not going to
Right.
happen anymore. How we get there, I don't really care. Like if you prefer one thing and I prefer another, I can hear about both. And that's where I bring choice in the mix, right? So then you can have kids helping make their own decisions on what is going to work best for them. And usually in general in life, when we make decisions, we're more likely to follow through on them than when someone makes decisions for you. And a lot of times for challenging kids, it's a power and control issue. Their issue is I just want to feel like I'm in charge. So you're going to tell me
Totally.
to sit. I'm going to stand just because you told me to sit.
Right. And I get kids like that because I have a lot of that in me
I know you do.
as well. And I think that where we go wrong is that so many people think that caring consequences and high expectations are mutually exclusive, and that really bothers me because they'll say things on social media that are talking about relationships or talking about giving students choice or talking about giving them agency, and not needing to be the one in power all the time. And people assume that with that I am saying that I don't expect a lot from students, or I don't hold them accountable to their greatness, or I don't push them hard. And that, I think that's where I we go sideways too often in schools, is that you know holding high expectations for students is the best way to love them. I believe, and then how we get them there, like you said, it's the punishment doesn't get them there. That's not the
Correct.
that's not the path that helps them to grow and become better.
Well, and it's proven. I mean, it's proven that, and look, I'm not anti-punishment in society. Like I think society, so like you murder someone, punish somebody, right? Like,
Right.
you molest a kid, punish them. Like
Right.
25 years to life. That is a punishment. And again, I'm not saying I'm anti that, but don't act like that rehabilitates, because it doesn't. It's been proven over and over again that that doesn't make people better. And so
Right.
while I think that's the right move, I guess, in society for some situations, not for kids. Like, kids are not really kids. You're still molding them. They're still
Sure.
growing in every facet. And my mindset is always be teaching. Like, you're as whatever is happening in a school is a teachable moment, right? Whether it's you're not learning your math facts, or your head is down when you come in, or you didn't pick up a piece of paper, right? It's all teachable. It's, how do I ask you to pick it up? Do I yell from across the room in front of your
Right.
friend, hey, pick that piece of paper up? Or do I privately, when no one's looking, say, hey, buddy, I know for a fact that you didn't drop that piece of paper because I saw it there when you walked in, but thank you so much for picking it up anyway. I'd really appreciate it. Thank you for picking it up anyway. I know you didn't drop it, but thanks, buddy. I appreciate it. And just walk away. Don't even look. Like, which
Exactly.
approach do you take? And I often found, one of my rules is, if I change me, I change everything around me. And I think that's a huge mistake that many schools make. And is they don't really force teachers to look in the mirror, right? I've never worked in a high school where they have a referral form where one of the lines on the referral form says what the adult did wrong. And I believe that
Right.
should be on. I believe, and I
Yeah.
say it in my workshops, I think the number one thing on a referral form should say what the adult did wrong. I think the number two thing should say what the adult could do differently next time. I think the number three thing should say what the kid did wrong. And number four thing should say what the kid could do differently next time.
Right.
In this way, and I'm saying this as a teacher, like, I
Sure.
was never an
Yeah. Yeah.
administrator. I'm a teacher because I tell people I'm an impulsive person. I do things and I say things frequently that I didn't mean to do and say. And that happens in every aspect of my life. And it frequently happened when there were 25 humans against me. You know what I'm saying? And like,
Oh, yeah,
and
just
I was
yesterday,
losing.
yeah,
Yeah.
I told a kid, I was at a basketball game yesterday, and I kind of got into it with a kid in the hall,
Is
a
this your
kid that
tweet, by the way, that you did?
yes,
I
yes,
saw
from
you.
last,
I was gonna read this. Let me read the tweet.
okay.
Let me read the tweet, because I was going to read this tweet, and then I wanted to talk about it. So you wrote, this is what Amy wrote. She wrote, talking with a student at the basketball game tonight. Him. I love how you do this. I love how you capture this moment. And this is a skill, by the way, capturing a moment and the amount of characters that you can do. It's really great. Okay. Him. Sorry for arguing with you today, Miss Fast. I just think it's a stupid rule. Me. Sorry for arguing with you too. I was just on a power trip. And just like that, all is well. Like, love the tweet. What a
It's
great tweet.
true.
Fantastic tweet.
Oh, well,
What
thank
was
you.
the
I
stupid
mean,
rule? I'm curious.
it was a stupid, I'm gonna get myself in trouble for saying this if
That's
any of our
okay.
students are watching, but
Nobody's listening.
we have a rule that you can't wear your hoods up in the hall. And
Okay.
the reason for the rule is because we want to see kids' faces. We
I
want
get the
them to
rule.
be
I have to
known. We
see it
want to be able to
everywhere.
talk to them,
Hmm.
at least keep one earbud out, that sort of thing. Um, so this kid was walking down the hall, and I'm like, hey, would you mind taking your hood off? And he's like, no, it's a stupid rule. And then I mean, I like power and control just as much as anyone else. I'm
Sure.
like, I can't let him talk to me like that with his
Hmm.
friends around and think that I can't, won't do anything about it, or I'm gonna win. And that's my primal lizard brain coming out, which
Yeah.
I'm human as much as anyone else. And so I pulled him aside and said, hey, let's take a walk or whatever, and made his friends go the other way, and thought I was going to have, this rational conversation where I just enlightened him about why the rule makes sense and why he needs to be respectful to me. And he basically was like, "Yeah, I'm not feeling it, and I don't care." So he took his hood off, but then he, took
Yeah.
off and
Yeah.
let me know he wasn't feeling it. And so in that moment, I feel powerless, and then my grab is for more power, and he's feeling the exact same way. And so I saw him at the game and just, started joking around with him. And he said first, he was a better person than I was in this moment. Hey, yeah, sorry about this morning. I just think it's a stupid rule. And I was like, it's okay. You have a point there. And I just said, well, I was kind of on a power trip. And he's like, yeah, forgiven. It's all good. And
Yeah.
and it's not that as principal I can't hold him to the expectations we have. It's that as principal, I shouldn't be arguing with a student in the hallway. It's
Right.
not about the rule. It's about how I went about trying to enforce it that was the issue. So
And yeah, interesting that you say that. So, and that's what I was going to say. So, under that premise of what the adult did wrong, what the adult could do differently next time, what would you put in there for your own thing on the top line and the second line?
Well, first of all, I called him out in front of his
There you
friends, which
go.
is
Number one.
a big no-no. I know better.
Yep.
Um, and the other thing is, I don't want my first interaction with anyone to be negative. And so, not only did I call him out in front of his friends, but I didn't even know this student. Um, Come to find out, when I learned his name, I knew of him, and I could think of 1,000 things that would be more important to talk to him about than his hood on any given day. And so I want my first interaction with students to always be positive, and I need to not call them out publicly. And I'm someone who is an educational researcher, and I preach about these things
Mhm.
on Twitter, and I'm not even tasked with um, helping them like in the classroom, putting any kind of academic demand on them, which makes it even harder sometimes to not engage in these power struggles. So if it's that easy for me to fall into this trap of needing to have control, it's exponential for teachers when they're trying to help kids master the content, and feeling all the pressures that they feel. So I get it. I try not to judge adults when they do things like I did yesterday, but we have to have the conversation about what we can do differently. We just have to.
Yes, we have to. And if you don't know this, this for me all came because of addiction recovery. I learned when I got to addiction recovery, I always believed everybody else was the problem in my life. That
Right.
was the problem. The problem was that I believed everybody else was the problem.
Sure.
My whole life, when I failed the test, the teacher was stupid. If I got cut from a team, the coach was an idiot. If a girl didn't
Right.
like me, she was clueless. Like there was always something else. And then I got to recovery, and they were like, "Here's a mirror," and literally like everything I would complain or talk about, they would say, right, but what did you do wrong? Right, but what could you do done differently? And I'd say that person's offensive. And they'd say, right, well, did you have to get offended? Just because someone
Right.
is offensive doesn't mean you have to get offended. Offended is about you. Offensive is about someone else. And I was like,
Amen.
but
Yeah.
that was the mentality that I brought into my classroom. I mean, my into my classroom, my mindset became whatever goes wrong, I have to do something differently, me. And looking internally was my number one thing that I would do. I love that he started the conversation with you.
Yeah.
And it would be that could go both ways, right? That
Sure.
there's nothing wrong with a teacher walking up to a kid unprompted and being like, "Hey, come here. I got a little carried away. I was a little loud earlier. I apologize for that. I am the principal here. My teachers are going to watch if they just don't see me doing this and trying to enforce these rules.
Right.
Sometimes they're coming from above me, and I don't really agree with it either." Like I used to do that all the time with kids. I think one of the things I say to teachers is I believe one of the most underrated pieces of classroom management is privacy, right? I think that is often an overlooked thing that makes it a giant difference. And I'm in
So
both
true.
camps, right? I'm in the camp of I actually personally believe that publicly praising people is often as embarrassing to them as publicly
Mm.
correcting people. I don't buy into the whole publicly praising it
Sure.
unless you're gonna publicly praise like reward everyone in honor of one. Like because I'm so proud of Amy, everybody gets a free night of homework. Then I'm
Right.
for that versus because Amy was so great, Amy gets a free night of
Sure.
homework.
It
That I think
breeds
annoys
competition
a lot
and
of people.
resentment. And,
They
yeah.
do that all the time though. Like they do to try to do that at conferences. Like I don't know if you've ever been introduced when you're about to speak and they try to read your bio and it's awful. Like it's embarrassing. I don't like it. It's uncomfortable. I'm sitting there for
Yep.
and so now I don't allow it. Like now I tell them do not read my bio, look at them with no notes and tell them why you decided to bring me in. Where did you
It's
find
great.
me? How did you hear about me? And I look at the audience and I say, now let's be clear. There's days I'm having crappy self-esteem and I will sit on an airplane and read my bio and I'm like, shit, I'm good. Like, oh, I forgot I did that. Oh yeah, I did that too.
Right.
But like this the thought that the whole world needs to hear it all the time, I don't know where that started. And I think it's an uncomfortable thing for at least for me, and I think it is for a lot of kids.
Absolutely. No, I totally agree with you. Yep.
Privacy is huge though, and in so many aspects of school, and that's like when I work with bus drivers, when I work with cafeteria aides, when I work with hall monitors, I try to pick like one or two things that they can do Like give them like one thing or two things to watch out for, and that's always at the top of my list. That one of the lines I like is stay personally connected to the kid without taking personally what they do and say. By the way, what's the hat rule about? And the because I feel like that it's always a hat and it's always a hood, and I feel like
Sure.
that's the case in every school I go to, and it's constant battle. It's a constant
It
battle. I
is.
I understand the thought process, right? Is can we see the kid's face? But then you get into like, what if the kid's wearing it? Like, then they try
I
to wear
know.
them where the ridge is like on the top of their head, and it's like you can really see their face. I don't
Right.
know.
So I mean, we give a student survey every year where we ask questions about like how hopeful students are about their future and how connected they feel to adults in the building and their peers. And we also ask them about school rules and like what they like and what they would change. And so last year, we actually changed our entire dress code based on the student feedback, and it was amazing how people people were at first, people meaning adults in the building at first were just panicked because all of a sudden we basically got rid of any dress code whatsoever and uh, said, we want you to thrive in this building, and so whatever you wear, just make sure you can thrive here. And um, so students started wearing hats and beanies, and it was so amazing because we weren't having those conversations in the hall of I spent all day long before that just saying, could you take off your hat? Could you take off your
Yeah.
hat? Could you take off your hat? And now I can say, hey, how's it going? How's your morning?
Or I like your
All
hat.
those
That's a
things.
cool hat.
Yeah,
Where'd you
I
get
like your
it?
hat. And there are absolutely no behavior problems because of a hat. It's just our fear of that like slippery slope of if we let them do this, then they'll do this. And um, I I have to remember um, that I'm usually um, more inclined to embrace change, sometimes too hastily, than a lot of my colleagues are. So that's I would say another challenge as principal is um, making sure that I'm honoring the voices of all of our stakeholders, and that includes our staff and our community members. Students obviously are the most important voice there, but there are so many things that if I was just operating independently, that I'd be ready to change now in our
Mm.
school system. But it would be egotistical of me to not gather all the voices of stakeholders before I do it. So as a result of the student survey and changing the hat rule and changing the dress code, it's been a better environment for everyone. So I think sometimes we just have these rules that are arbitrary, and the rule is more about um, adults being able to dictate something um, and then feel comfortable ourselves because we're able to enforce it. You know what I mean? And there's
Yeah,
really
sure, absolutely.
there's no rationale for other than because I said so.
Right.
And look, you're following that rule. It's like I
Yeah,
actually don't know why
yeah.
we have
And
it, but
yep. And that one of the things that I talk about is anytime you find yourself answering that you have a rule and your answer is because I said so, you're in trouble. Like my thought is
totally.
that a rule should always tie to a value. So the way I break it down is I like to do values and rules, and I think they're separate categories. So for me, a value answers why, the rule tells you what. So for example, a value would be we're going to respect each other, we're going to respect this place, we're going to respect ourselves. That'd be a value. A lot of teachers have respect posted as a rule, and I always tell them
Sure,
take it down. I don't think that's a rule. I think it's more important than a rule. It's a value. And so based on the value of respect, we will keep our hands and our feet to ourselves. Your hand is on her shoulder. Why do you care
sure,
so much that my hand is on her shoulder? We're just playing, we're just friends. I know, but it's not that I care about your hand on her shoulder. The truth is I don't actually care about that. I care that you learn how to respect somebody's personal space. And that's what we're working on here. See how my answer, when I answer why the kid has to follow the rule, my answer talks about a value.
the
Mr.
value,
Bendler,
yeah,
why are you such a lunatic about us bringing a notebook and a pen every day to class or a pencil? I'm not. I'm a lunatic about you becoming responsible people. And you haven't
right,
shown me you can be responsible. So if you're not going to show me that you can bring a pencil every single day to class, then you're not showing me that you can play on a varsity sports team or in a high level orchestra or band where you have to be a part of something bigger. And like for me, it was always more about the value than it was the rule rule or expectation. And I always found that by doing it that way, kids were much more likely to follow the expectations. They didn't always agree with them and they would
Sure.
sometimes battle with them. But I found like people in general, even rule breakers, so to speak,
Yeah,
follow good rules, right? I mean, I'm a rule breaker, but I drive on the right hand side of the road. Why?
totally.
Good rule. It makes sense,
Right.
right? I
Right.
stop at red lights. Why? Good rule. It makes sense. So if you can show me pretty quickly why something makes sense, I'm usually in on it. I'm interested though. So when the student feedback came back, right? Now is that a unilateral? Is that an arbitrary decision for you, or now do you still have to go with a committee of adults where you say, here's the results from this? Are we willing to make this change, or can you really kind of implement that change yourself? How did you go about doing that the
Well,
next
what we
phase?
did is we took the results and we had a focus group of staff and students, and so we brought them together. And it was less about are we going to do this, and more about how do we make this happen, so that it's a win for everyone. Because teachers wanted that respect thing, wanted students to be able to be known, and wanted to see their faces, and students wanted to be able to wear their hats. And so then together they determine, so how are we going to roll this out so that that can happen.
That's cool. So everyone can kind of get what they need in this
Sure.
process. Because
Sure.
and that
And
was
I
how I was. When I was teaching, I didn't like hats during tests and quizzes because as a student, I used to use my hat to cheat.
totally.
It
Yeah.
was a prime cheating tool. It was a
Yep.
phenomenal tool, and I use it all the time. I could cover my eyes. I could check
Hmm.
different answers against other people's. I could. So for me, it was that. So I would say that to kids. I'd say, look, during a test, just do me a favor, take it off real quick, and when you got to find a new way, you got to have a more innovative way to cheat. Like we were coming up with new stuff. You guys got to come up with new stuff because this isn't going to work. I see what you're doing here, and usually they would, not always, but usually. So you went
For sure.
from no hats, no, or to no hats to hats, and now you're back to no hat. Because
No,
so
we're still no hats, but the committee decided to keep the no hoods rule. And I think a lot, and I don't
got
know,
it.
I was not the one facilitating that work, but whoever was on that committee, the students and staff
Yep.
decided that that was going to be part of the compromise of being able to see faces in the
Okay.
halls. And there's still hoods that people wear in class sometimes. It's more of a hallway kind of thing at our school. And I don't know how long it's going to stick around, if it's going to stick around. I think
Yeah.
here, when you talk about values, it's interesting because so often we expect um, our students to toe lines that we wouldn't toe. Like we think about even within the hoops that we have to jump through as employees in the school district. And when things don't make sense to us, we don't jump through those hoops. We find a way to sidestep them, go around them, and we need to know the why um, behind our rules and expectations, and we need to have a shared value system that, even like you said, if we can't necessarily agree on how, we can come together around why at least that was conceived, and assume best intent in that regard. And so I think so often we expect things of students that we don't even do ourselves.
Yep. Yep. And I think the other specific to that is questions instead of statements, right? A lot of times in general, us teachers are used to giving statements to kids, right? Like such as, hey, bud, hey, you got to take that hood off. I see your hood. You got to take it off.
Right.
Versus, hey, come here. Can I talk to you real quick? Hey, real quick. Like, why do you think it's okay to wear that? Like, that we've been
Mhm.
told a million times. Like, explain this to me. What's your thought process behind this? Because
Right.
it's going to happen. You're going to walk by me and I'm going to get crap from people above me for not telling. So why explain this to me? Can you talk to me more about like where you bring them in the mix as often
Right.
as you can?
It's a game changer.
It really
Absolutely.
is.
Yeah.
As are you. As are you. Any last piece of advice or wisdom for people? What's like your number one piece of advice or wisdom that you could give somebody that's just kind of starting out, or just maybe somebody who's down and out? I got actually this was an interesting one. I got this message on Twitter. Um and so sometimes I get these questions from people and they're a little bit long, but this one says, I want to read this because it's a ninth grade kid. Please help. I have a ninth grade boy. His behavior has changed significantly since the beginning of the year. He's always been one I have to redirect. Somewhere around late September, his attitude changed significantly. He's withdrawn, sullen, very quick to anger, puts his head down all the time, buries himself in his phone and AirPads. AirPods. I've spoken to mom on a number of occasions. She insists he's a sweet boy and has begged me not to write referrals because our multiple conversations. You see these go long sometimes.
Hmm.
But he refuses to do anything. Has started lying and becoming sneaky. Walked out on me last week. I know that's a big one. Any one, piece of nugget of advice to that teacher?
I would say we at our school we put a huge emphasis, like you said, on relationships and connection, and I think we because if you're in this profession at all, you're a humanitarian and you care about people and you want to see change and you want to see them thriving. And so by nature, we're a little bit impatient with the results of that, and it can feel super defeating when you've spent a whole semester pouring into students and giving forth all this emotional labor, and you're just not seeing the results. And so I would say, and I've had to remind myself of this constantly because I'm one of the most impatient people that I know. This work isn't meant to be done in silos. It's not a craft that is independent from the other staff in the building. It's really the cliche of it takes a village is so true, and it takes all of us over time. And it's not this big hour-long philosophical conversation with the student that moves the dial.
Right.
It's consistently 1 minute
Every
a
day.
day, every day, every person in the building, trying to meaningfully connect, look people in the
Yeah.
eye, smile, and have those genuine conversations that move the dial. And sometimes, unfortunately, we don't even get to see the fruits of our labors. You're a sixth grade teacher and you're just pouring into this kid and you don't see change, at all in middle school, and then they go to high school and then more of the village pours into this kid and pours into this kid. And I see it all the time. They graduate as seniors, and as a result of that cumulative, collective, emotional labor, they have hope. And they might not, be have mastered math, and they might still be struggling with some behaviors, but they think about where they would be without that.
No
And that's
question.
what we never know. We never know. It might not feel like a success story by our definition, but we never know what could have happened with that student had we not collectively poured into them. And so I would say, if you can, the hardest thing in this work, I think this is probably a tweet of mine too, but um, the hardest thing about this work is facing that reality that we can't save every kid necessarily. And the best thing about this work is holding on to that hope that we can save every kid. And so
Yeah.
it's a double-edged sword. But
But it's a
if you
numbers
can,
game. It's a look. Teaching is a numbers game. It's a contact sport, right? The more kids you contact, the better you'll do. And like the bottom line is, it's you got to shoot a lot of threes, and if you make a few of them, you're good. And you're
yep,
not going to make every one, but you got to be a shooter. You got to be willing to throw it up, and it's the same thought process here. It's just constantly not giving up on that ability to go after certain kids. The one specific piece of advice that I'll give her before we wrap up is, and again, she might be doing this, but get personal yourself. Like, make sure that you're vulnerable to the kid. A
right,
lot of
be
that
real,
Yes, a lot of that question was what's wrong with the kid and what's happening with the kid, and make sure like he knows something about you, like what struggle have you had in your life that you've overcome. And like sometimes taking a kid in the hall and just walking around the hall with them for like a couple minutes, where you're not trying to get anything out of them. You
right,
just say to them, hey, let me tell you, I just want you to know, like when I was 14, I got this report card, and it said I was needed improvement in every single area of my school life, literally except for
right,
two, right? And like you share something from your life that you've struggled with, and sometimes that'll get a kid to click. It'll get a kid to immediately be like, okay, like me, or at least look up at you and
right.
want to hear more. And that's really the goal, is to get the conversation started.
I don't think
Anything?
we have
Go ahead.
enough agendaless connections. I think too often we connect with an agenda, and students can see through that. And so
I,
I agree.
I
Connect
love that.
connect
That's a
without the
great
agenda to change them.
that's a book title, agendaless connections, like where you literally are just trying to connect with absolutely no agenda whatsoever. Amy, you're the best. Listen, this hour flew. I could spend like another hour literally doing this, but I
It's been
appreciate
fun.
so much. You're amazing. I love following you. I love being a part of what you're doing, and I've loved that we become friends. So thank you for everything, and I'm looking forward to going to dinner with you in April when I get out there.
Me too. Thank you so much, Brian.
I'd love to meet your family too, if possible, if everybody's around.
That'd be
So
great. Let's make it
we're
happen.
heading. Yeah, we'll make it happen. Good to see you. Take care.
Good to see you too.
All right.